Hello, my name is Tom Riis. I'm a graduate student in the Department of Biomedical Engineering at the University of Utah, and I'm excited to talk to you about a method that we've developed to deliver a known intensity of ultrasound through the skull and into the brain. We're all excited about these therapeutic applications of transcranial focused ultrasound, such as neuromodulation, local drug delivery, and blood-brain barrier opening. However, the clinical translation of these therapies has been severely hampered by the human skull. Specifically, the human skull highly distorts, attenuates, and phase shifts incoming beams of ultrasound, making it nearly impossible to deliver a known intensity of ultrasound at a specific brain target. To give you a little bit more background on this problem, I'm showing you here a transducer array mounted onto a human subject. On the left, you see the beams of the transducer array will encounter a severe and variable attenuation as it passes through the human skull. This severe and variable attenuation leads to a very low and variable intensity at the brain target of interest. Simply put, we no longer know, after the ultrasound passes through the skull, how much energy we're delivering to a specific brain target. And typically, that energy is often an order of magnitude lower than the energy we intended to deliver to that brain target. So without correcting for this issue, we really can't deliver a safe and effective ultrasound therapy through the skull. We performed a simple experiment to quantify this issue. So we measured the pressure at target, or the peak pressure focus of an ultrasound transducer, both in water and then through an ex vivo human skull. So on the left here, I'm showing you a black bar, which is the normalized free field intensity of the ultrasound transducer. Then this red bar is showing the intensity at target after the ultrasound transducer sends the ultrasound through these ex vivo human skulls. So each dot you see is an individual, unique ex vivo human skull. Again, the intensity at target is reduced by roughly an order of magnitude, and it's highly variable across each different subject. So one approach that we might take to restore the intensity at target back to the intended value would be simply to ramp up the intensity that we send in. We know most of that intensity is going to be attenuated by the skull, so we should just deliver more intensity so that we get the intensity that we want at the brain target after it passes through the skull. So one approach to do that would be to apply a scalar value of average attenuation from the skull taken from the literature. We tried this approach with two different attenuation values for the skull taken from the literature. So this first one is from Frye et al. And we see that applying this scalar value across 8 skulls highly overestimates the attenuation and delivers an unsafe level of ultrasound intensity at our brain target. So we're delivering much more energy than we expect into the brain here. We took a second average value for skull attenuation taken from White et al. And this time we underestimate the intensity, or the attenuation caused by the skull. And now we're delivering an ineffective amount of intensity at target inside the brain. So what I hope this plot captures here is both the substantial variability of attenuation between subjects' skulls, and also the fact that we really can't approximate or capture this variability with just a single scalar value. Another approach that we might take would be to use CT phase corrections for the skull, which is used in these high-intensity focused ultrasound ablations of brain tissue. This plot here is showing the intensity at target through the skull with a perfect phase correction taken with hydrophone phase correction values. And what we see is that even with the best case scenario, we really only recover 15% of the intensity at target. And this is really because the reduction in intensity through the skull is mostly due to the attenuation of the ultrasound rather than dephasing of the ultrasound beams. Overall, what I hope this slide communicates is that if we really want to solve this skull correction problem, we need to measure attenuation directly on a subject-specific basis. We have come up with a new method to deliver a known intensity inside the skull that does just this. So this method relies on this hardware setup you see here, where we have two ultrasound transducer arrays covering the left and right sides of the skull. Each transducer array has 128 elements. The schematic of our device is shown on the left here, and our actual device mounted onto a human subject is shown on the right. The way this method works is that we take through transmit measurements. So these are measurements where we emit a brief pulse of ultrasound from an element on one of the transducer arrays, and we record from all other elements on the opposing transducer array. We take these through transmit measurements both in water and then with the device actually applied to the subject. And from the difference in these two measurements, we can show how the presence of the subject's skull is distorting the incoming beams of ultrasound and then correct for them. So to walk you through this method, starting here on the left, we measure the pressure at target from an individual transducer element, just in free field or water with a hydrophone. Then we mount the device onto a subject, and the presence of their skull will introduce an attenuation factor A and a speed up factor tau in front of each transducer element. So we take our through transmit measurements both through water and through the skull. And by comparing these two, we can solve a system of equations to accurately predict that attenuation factor A and that speed up factor tau. Once we've estimated those values, we can adjust our stimulation parameters to directly compensate for those skull distortions. So we increase the power that we send to our transducer element by the reciprocal of the attenuation that we estimate, and we delay the firing of our transducer by the speed up factor. And by doing this, we return the pressure at target back to its intended value in free field. We ran a simple experiment to test the efficacy of this correction method, where we measure the pressure fields inside 8 ex vivo skulls under each different correction method. And here are the results of that experiment. So this is the intensity in free field normalized to 1. This is the result of the hydrophone correction. This is the best possible correction you could achieve. This is the intensity at target when no correction is applied. So again, we reduce the intensity at target by roughly an order of magnitude, and it's highly variable across subjects. And I want to point out that this is actually what's often done in the field with human subjects. And finally, this is the result of our ultrasound-based correction method. We recover roughly 95% of the intended intensity at target. Following this experiment, we performed a simple neuromodulation experiment, where instead of the hydrophone at focus, we had subjects place their index finger into the ultrasound focus, and we applied different correction methods. And then we recorded response frequency. So we had subjects report if they felt stimulation from the ultrasound, and we used that to gauge neuromodulation of each different correction method. So we're stimulating free nerve endings in the finger and measuring nociceptive responses. What we found again was that our ultrasound-based correction method is on par with the best case scenario hydrophone correction. It's also really important to point out here that without any correction, as you see here, we didn't measure any significant neuromodulation. So what this is telling us is that this correction is really critical to actually delivering an effective neuromodulatory dose through the skull. In conclusion, this correction method overcomes the key barrier to the transcranial focused ultrasound therapies that we were discussing in the beginning. This correction restored the intensity to 95% of the intended value across 8 ex vivo human skulls. And as we saw with the neuromodulation experiment, this correction is critical to realizing a safe and effective ultrasound therapy. So with that, I want to thank my lab and our funding sources, and I'm happy to take any questions.